A little bit of time talking about Kairos. Kairos is one of the four rhetorical appeals, and it's in combination with logos, ethos, and pathos. So, Kairos is one of those appeals. It's an appeal that you use when you're trying to convince someone of something, appeal to an audience, and in the case of Kairos, make the most of a moment in time. So, Kairos is thinking about when is the right moment to speak up, or say your piece, put in your 2 cents, or whatever other kind of cliche phrase you want to use to talk about how timing works with speech. So, how does Kairos relate to rhetoric? It relates to rhetoric because Kairos is part of the background of when something is said, whether this is spoken, written, or other media that a message is communicated through. So, Writers select specific rhetorical appeals or strategies like kairos, logos, ethos, or pathos in order to deploy deploy in specific rhetorical situations that you think are going to make your speech or your argument the most effective. So one of the primary strategies is kairos because timing is very important. So, or kairos is defined as a moment in time, especially the right time or the opportune time. So, when you think something is going to work out for the best, and this can be based on a variety of factors in the background of the situation. Kairos can also be defined as the occasion for discourse and the surrounding conditions that present the rhetor with opportunities and constraints. So, what this means is that no matter what, when you speak, there will be pros and cons to speaking at that moment. So, even if the timing is really good, there might still be some drawbacks to speaking at that point in time. So, ultimately, Kairos relates to rhetoric because Kairos is the right message at the right time. So you might have what you view as the right message, but if you say it at a time when people aren't ready to be paying attention or your intended audience is perhaps distracted by something else, even if your message is strong, the timing isn't right. So it's not that your message is bad, but it's still a little bit of rhetorical inaccuracy on your end as the rhetor. Consequently, if the timing is great, but your message doesn't communicate what you want to say clearly, or is in a medium that your audience can't relate to, then that isn't going to work out very well either. So, to give a little fun example of Kairos from art history, we're going to look at this image, which is called Dali Atomicus by Philippe Halsman, which was a photograph created in 1948. So, the photographer who captured this image of surreal artist Salvador Dali in midair believed that when you ask a person to jump, his attention is mostly directed toward the act of jumping, and the mask falls so that the real person appears. So, essentially, this photographer felt like all of your kind of self-defense fell apart when you jumped in the air. So instead of just posing for a photograph or smiling for the camera, you do something that makes you think about something other than the fact that your picture is being taken. And he believed that this made the timing of capturing a person's true personality perfect. So the timing of the photograph had to be just right, according to Halsman, to reveal Dali's true self and to capture the action that's happening in this image, which includes what appears to be a chair floating in midair, water flying through the air, and also 3 cats flying through the air. Kind of questionable, but we'll leave that behind us. So, interestingly enough, this photograph actually took 26 attempts to create. So, this just goes to show you that you might think your timing is right the first time, but you might actually have to try again a lot more times to get the timing just right for your audience or for your intended purpose, which for Halsman was to get a good photographic composition and also the right expression on Dali's face. So, here we can see a couple of the outtakes or the rejected takes from Halsman's photo of Salvador Dali and his notes for like why the timing didn't work out quite right. So, for example, on the left, he said Dali jumped too late, so you can see he's still on the ground. and that's not ideal for what's happening. He wants Dolly to be in the air. And then in the one on the right, he wrote that water is covering Dolly's face. So if the point is to capture his expression, the timing was wrong for where the water fell. Well, this image on the right was being taken because we can't see Dolly's face. So the kairotic moment is appropriate or effective timing. It's the right time to make an argument or a rhetorical intervention, the moment when the message will be most relevant or effective. I feel like the sunrise is a great example of a kairotic moment. The sun is just peeking over the clouds. A couple minutes later, the sun is up and it's not really sunrise anymore. The clouds will be lit differently. So it all depends on why you are trying to capture an image at a specific time. I think photography is a great metaphor for thinking about Kairos. And we've all taken a jillion pictures of sunsets, I'm sure, and some of them, frankly, turn out better than others. So, Kairos can also be invented. So a sense of urgency or immediacy that's constructed by the writer, the timeliness is created through the writer's argument. So if you think something is of particular importance and you want to convince people of it and tell people that it's important right now, that is invented Kairos. You have to convince your audience to pay attention to something at this moment in time for a reason. Kairos can also be situated. This means that the timeliness that arises from a situation or event, something happens that presents a window of opportunity for a writer to seize upon. Situated Kairos is the feeling and effect, not the event itself. So what this means is that something happens and you think that it's the right moment to speak up about it. So usually in this situation, the message is inspired by something that happens rather than feeling like something needs to be said and making sure that the timing is right for your audience. So sometimes both of these are happening at once. It depends on who the audience for the message is and what the other contextual factors are. Of course, we've all been in situations where we're wondering if something is happening at the right time or if your timing is good. So here are a couple examples. Your teacher mentions invented Kairos in class. You raise your hand and ask a question before she moves on. You're at a party and someone tells a story. You've been in a similar situation. You add your funny comment into the conversation before everyone walks away. You're on a romantic moonlit date with the person you've been seeing for a few months. Now is the time to say, I love you. Do it while they still have that faraway, peaceful expression. So as you can see, it's easy to imagine the opposite scenario when the kairotic response isn't quite right. So if your funny comment is added after everyone has moved on from that topic of conversation, the people listening to you are just going to be confused. Maybe if you approach your romantic partner when they're having a really bad morning and they're running late for work, it's probably not the best time to tell them your true feelings. You might want to wait until you're having a slightly more relaxing time. Kairos is also about adaptability. So this is about the writer's ability to really shift and pay attention to changing circumstances. So it's possible for the timing to be right one moment, but to be really wrong the next moment, just not quite right, because situations change constantly and rapidly. If you sense that the context is changing and now is not quite the right moment anymore to contribute to a conversation, you're still exercising your rhetorical knowledge of Kairos. So knowing when to speak and when not to speak is essentially an awareness of Kairos. So spend a few minutes thinking of a situation where you thought you had the timing right for something, but it actually turned out you didn't. So how could you tell that your timing was off? If you can't think of one where your timing was off, think of a situation where your timing was really good and explain how you could tell. Finally, here are some examples of how it can work in a written piece. So your writing is either responding to an exigent moment and thus the feeling you have is kairotic, or you're inventing this kairotic moment as you go yourself. So, this has a lot to do with the way you write and how you actually structure what you're saying and kind of the order in which you say something. So, as a writer, you need to create the right moment in your text or in your communication. So, you might ask yourself questions like, is now the time to bring up a specific fact, or does it feel better to bring it up later on? Should I add this quote here or bring it up later? And have I explained enough context that my point is relevant to my audience? So, have you invented your Kairos well enough to be able to say the point you're about to say and have it make sense for your audience? That's all we've got for Kairos at this point in time, folks. It's enough Kairos for today. It would be not kairotic to keep talking about Kairos for too long. So, we're going to check in with some other rhetorical appeals next time. And you'll also read a little bit about Kairos in your book. So, be on the lookout for definitions of Kairos and take some notes on that yourself.